Oh, okay, here we go. Okay, hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the second episode of the Platinum Era podcast. I have Dan, the bodybuilder in Thailand, with me again. Today we're going to be talking about the Golden Era and Golden Era bodybuilding. We're going to go into our thoughts on it, our opinions, and everything we know about it. I think it's going to be an interesting episode just to dive into the history because it's something we've talked about a lot in private conversations. What's up, Dan?
Hey, yeah, I'm excited to talk about the golden era of bodybuilding a lot because that's the bodybuilding that most of us, when we first got introduced to bodybuilding, we were looking at those guys, Arnold and the crew that trained at Gold's Gym Venice Beach, and we were saying that's the goal on day one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I first saw bodybuilders, I think the first bodybuilders that I was exposed to were like just through the magazines. Like, I guess I would see like Flex magazine and stuff like that at my school gym. And I think some of the early bodybuilders that I saw, I remember seeing Kai Green like really early on. What were the first bodybuilders that you actually saw that you remember seeing?
Um, Arnold and pumping iron. I was watching that when I was 18 years old. And that was like a big one for me because when I would see those guys on pumping iron, I was thinking, I want to look exactly like that. And so then I would be going to the gym, because I had been training for a year at that point at 18. And I'd be, before I left to go to the gym, I'd be looking at pictures of Arnold and Franco. And then when I came back, I'd be looking at pictures of Serge Dubray.
So you saw those guys before you actually saw the modern guys?
I was aware of the modern guys. I was aware of Victor Martinez, Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, Dexter. But I mean, that just looked disgusting.
Yeah. And what do you think now, like after being more in bodybuilding? I also thought it like that the modern guys really looked disgusting when I first got into bodybuilding, but I think now I've like gotten used to it more. I still prefer the golden era look, but I'm not like offended by the huge bodybuilders today either. Like I like them both now.
Yeah, I can appreciate the ones today too, like 90s going forward. But at the same time, I do think it's pretty disgusting and like undesirable. Like, being a complete drug abuser and becoming one of these growth hormone insulin steroid freaks that, are carrying around 270, 300 pounds of muscle. That's pretty like disgusting and vile, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it definitely got really extreme. And I think so. I guess that kind of brings me into the first topic that I want to discuss of like why people are so nostalgic for the 70s and it's had such a huge resurgence now. And I think a lot of it does actually have to do with like health more than like the way that people, well, obviously looks are important, but I think that a lot of people realize that they don't want to put themselves through what they have to get through to be like 300 pounds, and
Yeah.
they see the golden era guys. And I think it's a way to get that feeling of the lifestyle of being a bodybuilder, which is like a cool feeling without kind of the, like you said, like the kind of gross parts of like drug abuse and just blatant disregard for your health. Would you say
Mhm.
that? Would you say that makes sense? I mean,
And
yeah,
Arnold right now is
so much.
uh well because that's when they're holding it, those guys that were golden era bodybuilders, they were trying to look like ancient Greek statues. And now so they were already trying to model themselves off of like an aesthetic that had proven to be something that people liked for 1,000 years. And now we like that too because we see that and you think, oh, he's got all the muscles developed perfectly. But they don't look like they don't belong on a human body. They still look like they flow and match with a human body. They just look completely developed, all of them.
Yeah, I think that they definitely took a more artistic approach. Like if you listen to a lot of them talking, they seem to really care about sculpting the body in a perfect way and like aesthetics and proportions and stuff like that. And I think that's really gone out the window nowadays.
Yeah.
Why do you think that people kind of stop caring about that stuff?
Well, what they were talking about a lot in the golden era, and if you watch Rick Drayson on YouTube, what is important to him about bodybuilding is having a good body or having a killer body, having a body that is impressive, makes people say, wow, is like an ideal for the average person. That's basically what he talks about. And you can kind of see that was Rick Drayson's goal in the Golden Era from the way he speaks. What did you say again before that? The question?
I guess it's like, I don't know. I completely forgot.
All right.
I just I know a lot of people were pushing the size back in the day too, right? And do you think it's a matter of that they just didn't know how to get that big? Because a lot of guys were pushing the drugs hard, they were pushing the training hard, but they just seem to be missing a piece of the knowledge somewhere to get to like a huge size. I think a lot of the guys were still trying to play the size game, but maybe they just didn't know how. And I feel like a kind of in a sense that a lot of them accidentally just stumbled on like really good physiques. Maybe the more like meathead ones, like a lot of them definitely were artists and were trying to make the perfect physique. But I feel like a lot of them just kind of stumbled into it because of just the way that they dieted at the time and the way that they trained at the time. And the drugs were great and they were not excessive and they were prescribed by doctors. So I feel like a lot of them just ended up looking great by accident. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But at the same time, when we are talking about like pros that, like Golden Era pros, we are talking about guys who were on average, taking entire bottles of Dianabol per day as only part of their cycle.
But still, they couldn't really reach like those crazy, 300-pound ripped size, even though they were like abusing anabolics a lot, right? Yeah. And why do you think that is? You think it's because of insulin? Because they did have growth hormone too.
Yeah, mostly. And I mean, the only people that had the growth hormone was, there was a tiny bit of cadaver growth hormone floating around in the 70s. And then in the 80s, they started getting some recombinant growth hormone, and the dosages that they were using back then, it was not really possible to use the recombinant growth hormone at more than 4 IUs per day. So they were using it like for a professional bodybuilder going into a competition, they were using around 4 IUs of pharmaceutical grade growth hormone back in the 80s to do that. But the really that type of look where you have modern bodybuilding today, where the body just looks like one big chunk of like
just meat.
Meat that you just like cut out of a big block, that is insulin. Like what that is insulin. That is the difference. But when you take, growth hormone steroids, and then you have, the Golden Era bodybuilders, and then you add insulin to it, and you get this big, stinky, rotten cheese texture looking like it's, full of site injections, just looks like a big shit.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of, so the idea was to start with the 70s because that's kind of, it's kind of when bodybuilding started. Like, I guess it was around in the 50s and 60s and obviously before that, but I would say it wasn't really bodybuilding as we know it today. Would you agree? Like the 50s and 60s, they had a kind of a different mentality, I think.
Yeah, that low dosage steroids. I think most of them were using, 15 to 30 milligrams D-ball per day. But then you get, Arnold coming on the scene, bringing his massive steroid abuse from Germany with him. And then, that kind of spreading across all the bodybuilders.
So I'm like I've done so much research into the cycles that they did, and like, kind of to some extent have experimented on myself trying to like figure out how they got that look, because the look was different,
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of go through the 70s and then the 80s and 90s together and like talk about what we think like contributed to the look, because I think the 70s look is great and the 80s look I think is in some ways even better than the 70s because they started to get Trent and Master on, and it really hardened them up a lot, and I feel like that was kind of a good.
They were way harder.
I love the 80s, honestly. Like, I feel like it's really underrated in terms of the look. But let's stick to the Golden Era for this podcast. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was in your last podcast on the Steroids podcast, you brought up the book by Robert Kerr. Was that book Practical Application of Anabolic Steroids? Is something like that?
I can't remember the name was. I think he's got a couple books. The doctor that was doing all the steroids for the Venice and World Gym bodybuilders in California in the 70s.
Yeah, and I actually got my hands on it and I read the book, and he does actually talk a lot about low dosages, but then like usually towards the end of the chapter he'll be like, and if it's a professional athlete or they ask for it, of course, like if it's justified, we'll go higher, you know? But
Okay.
but for the
So
general like chapter, he's usually talking about 2 to 500 milligrams. And then at the end of the chapter, he's like, but in certain cases, like you get what I'm saying? So it's kind of similar to what people are saying today that I saw in the book.
it sounds like he wants to have two books, and this is one of the other ones, because the one that I read was him talking about the all the different cycles that he prescribed to the athletes and the bodybuilders and everybody who really used steroids in the LA Hollywood area from the 70s to the 80s.
Yeah, that's interesting because I definitely want to see that one too. I mean, it was a very informative book, honestly. The one that I read, it was kind of like an early, really early, like it kind of read like Dan Duchesne or like Ultimate Guide to Roids. It was like he talked about every compound individually.
Mm-hmm.
And then he talked about the dosages that he would typically use with the compounds, which dosages that he thought were healthy and which ones that he thought were excessive, right? And one thing that he did talk about was he basically would put them on like stacks of like multiple drugs at a time, obviously. And he talked a lot about the synergies of them, and he would keep them all around 500 milligrams for 3 to 4 drugs. So, I mean, when you add it up, it really ends up being quite a bit. And that was just the conservative dosages that he was ready to put out for like the public,
Mm. Yeah. I've noticed that too in my own steroid use, that supplementing a bunch of different steroids at low dosages has really awesome effects. And I would definitely say it's superior to using only 1 or 2 steroids at higher dosages.
Yeah, I think I definitely still like, now that I'm kind of getting back into bodybuilding, I'm really interested in experimenting with like kind of with a lot of the different things that I never got to try before. One thing that I thought was really interesting that he mentioned in the book was they use testosterone purely as a bulking agent, and DECA was the base for cutting. That's what he was saying. So they actually looked at DECA as a cutting drug, and they would use it on its own.
Yeah, but I mean that's basically what I see from 19 Nors when they are not combined with testosterone or dianabol. 19 Nors don't really put any water on your body.
Yeah, and I remember when I took like 1,500 milligrams of DECA for 6 weeks before, and
1500
yeah,
solo.
yeah,
Cool.
and I don't know, it was a UGL, so I don't know, like maybe it was test or what, you know what I mean? But I think it was legit because it didn't feel like test, and I didn't use AI, so I mean, I probably would have needed one at 1,500 if it was test. And I was really hard. Obviously, I was like bloated and there was water retention, but it wasn't like testosterone where it just really blows you up. The water was inside the muscles. So it was a different
So
look.
you didn't have any kind of like a bloated look to your skin or anything like that.
No, the skin, I noticed that, when people bring the test high, they get that rough texture on the skin,
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really see that, but I don't know. I would be really curious to try Pharmacy DECA so what Rick Drayson said that they used to cut for a contest was DECA, Primo, and Winstrol. And that stuff is all still available pharmacy grade. And I think that would give a really classic look. I think that would give a really good like Menser Arnold sort of look. Maybe DECA at like 900 with like 600 Primo, 4 IUs of growth, and Winstrol at 50 milligrams a day. I think that would be crazy look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that too. Or you could do like Winstrol Anavar combo to make it even better.
Yeah, I think that the old school drugs that they had are like during that time really contributed to the look, but also I think that it was I found it interesting that they ate low carb all the time, and they never really upped the carbs, and they always kept the protein super high and the carbs really low and the fats moderate. What do you think about eating like that year round?
Well, that way of eating makes me feel the best. So, not having to do with bodybuilding, but having to do with quality of life. That style is by far my favorite type of eating. Um, However, and I do think it does work good for bodybuilding too, as long as it's on a cyclical kind. Because from what I've what understand, 1 or 2 days a week they would go to a buffet or something and really eat a lot of carbs. Is that what you've heard as well?
Yeah, so I mean, it's usually kind of like they keep the carbs low throughout the week, and then on Sunday they'll do a cheat day where they want. And I think that's pretty common in a lot of fitness models and like influencers nowadays. I think do that type of thing too. So I think it's a good strategy for staying lean all the time.
Hmm. Yeah, and I also like it that I'm not controlled by food. I feel much more in control of my body and the way that it feels when I'm eating a low carb diet because my blood sugar isn't going up and down all day. It's pretty much self regulating.
Are you still on that like keto style diet that you've been doing for the past couple of weeks?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do this if I have access to the food. Sometimes, in certain countries, it can be hard to have access to the right foods. Like in Vietnam, there was no way to get just like plain meat, really. So I had a shit diet there. But while I've been in California over the C virus lockdown, I've been eating the way that I desire to, and that is, I eat meat and green vegetables for all my meals, but sometimes I'll eat some fruit with it or something too, or occasionally I'll have a sweet potato with it or something. But my body is sustained off of the meat and vegetables, which is more of a golden era type of diet.
Yeah, I think that when you had one of your best looks on, I remember you telling me it was mostly just steak and white potatoes, and
Yeah.
you were on that for a while. Could you talk a little bit about that diet? Because I find the way that you eat, I remember when I stayed with you, it's you don't have like a meal plan or anything like that. You just eat protein and fat and carbs pretty much whenever you're hungry, right? Like, how do you decide what you're going to eat for the day?
Well, it depends. It depends on what the goal is, but if I'm trying to gain strength, performance, and size in the gym, then uh, I've got to be eating things like rice and potatoes. Yeah, but if I'm looking to lose fat, or if I'm looking to not make extremely quick changes, or if I'm looking for some kind of recomposition effect, then eating the meat and else is a good one. I mean, humans, especially people with white ancestry, such as myself, are big game hunters. That's where our ancestors. That's what they ate. They ate meat, and they also ate little vegetables that they could find. But for the most part, my ancestors were going out, killing a buffalo, and bringing it back, and mostly survived off of meat. And when I eat that, I feel good.
Yeah, I think that it's really cool to try to kind of recreate like I would be curious to recreate as much as I can the diet training and the drugs of a certain period, right? To see how my body looks and that if I can resemble that look. And I think that like you kind of unconsciously did that a little bit. Or I mean, obviously there's the knowledge is there, but I just find that like the way that you looked a lot of the time and the way that I was trying to look too and kind of achieve to some degree, like especially when we were training together, was kind of like the golden era type look because we weren't that big. We weren't eating a lot of carbs. We weren't doing any cardio, but we were still pretty lean. And I don't know. I just felt like it was very sustainable. And I want to get back to that sort of point. I don't really resonate with the modern bodybuilding thing of like, I just feel like if you're eating 6 meals a day and they're all super planned out and like this kind of OCD thing where you like have all these timings and you have to inject yourself with things at specific times and you have to eat at specific times, specific things, it kind of takes the fun out of bodybuilding. And I think that's why people like the golden era too, because it was fun and it was about the lifestyle and looking and feeling good, like you said. And now I feel like it's just turned into this whole big, like, I don't know, just very OCD and it doesn't really resonate with me. What do you think about that?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's definitely a major contributing factor about why I do things the way I do, because exactly, like, I want this to be fun. I'm doing this because I'm doing it for fun. I'm not doing it because I feel like um like shit about myself, and so now I need to become a bodybuilder or something. Like, I'm doing this because I want to have fun. So I can't be year round, year after year, OCD about measuring my food and like taking, like you said, injections or tablets at certain times, and like having my life be run by this anxiety and fear of messing up the next thing, which is the way a lot of bodybuilders are. They're very compulsive and obsessive. And I don't want that. I don't want to live a shit bodybuilder life. I want to live a fun bodybuilder life. So that's why I try to, I say steroids, bodybuilding, meals, training, it's all flexible. There's more than one way to do it. And I try to help make sure everybody knows that when I'm talking to them, that it's not such a rigid thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I want to. I mean, I really like your message on bodybuilding specifically, and I completely agree. And that's why I kind of wanted to like make this podcast too. It's just because I feel like a lot of the bodybuilding podcasts out there and a lot of the bodybuilding content out there now, it's so focused on like being a bodybuilder, which is this certain set of things. And bodybuilders do this. They eat 6 meals a day. They train hard every single time. You have to kill yourself with progressive overload. And it's like so hardcore. I feel like now everybody wants to be, not everybody, but like every bodybuilder now wants to be so hardcore. And like, I think that it's fun to be hardcore sometimes, but if you just live your whole life that way, you're missing out on a lot of things that you could be enjoying. And I feel like bodybuilding should be a supplement to your lifestyle, not your entire life. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as I'm listening to that too, it makes me think that that kind of training and obsessiveness and everything, like, it definitely comes from massive insecurities, because it's just not enjoyable.
Yeah. And I feel like when I see people post progress pictures and it's like 5 years into their bodybuilding and 7 years into their bodybuilding and they put like half an inch on their arms and like their back got like a little thicker. You know what I mean? When people post those type of pictures, like professionals and stuff like that, I'm like, who really cares? Like, to me, it's more about just like being a bodybuilder, just having muscles and just looking good to myself. I don't really care if I like put a little bit of size on or what, you know what I mean? It's like, as long as you look good and you feel good, I don't really care if my like hamstrings are like a little small or my like, like lower back isn't like completely crisp. Like it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. Like being this warrior pretending, pretending that you're this samurai training for the fight of your life. No, that's not what bodybuilding is. You're going into a commercial box and paying money, taking steroids, getting big.
Yeah, it's so simple. And I think that what people like to about that time that I wish that I had now and like always want as a, just as a person is like the camaraderie that they had, that they all trained together and they pushed each other and stuff like that. And it wasn't so much about the competition as it was just about like the fact that they were all friends and they all hung out all day. So they just lived a lifestyle together. And I think another thing that people really liked about that time period was that these guys seemed to be like, they had a lot of girls around and they were like attractive. Right. And
yeah.
I feel like nowadays it's like bodybuilders don't really like, I feel like there's been like a divide between like bodybuilders and like aesthetics people, whatever. And the aesthetics people, although when I was younger, I thought they were cool, but now that I'm a little older, it's just like they're all about that. And that's also retarded, in my opinion. Like, that's not everything that training should be about, and just lying and pretending you're natural and just doing everything for like your Gymshark sponsorship and just being like completely fake.
Fakest industry with the fakest people, man. Fakest industry with the fakest people. And that's why people like to listen to your stuff, because you're not fake. That's the same reason why people like to listen to my stuff, because I'm not fake. This industry is so saturated with toxicity. It's almost like the deep state of the USA government. It's just saturated with toxicity.
I think it's any industry though, really, because there's always an incentive to lie. There's always a financial incentive to lie,
Yeah.
And the guys in the 70s also lied, they have,
and big time. Yeah.
We look back at them like, with obviously golden goggles, because it's the golden era and they look great and everything. But, they were lying and pushing supplements. They didn't talk about steroids. They didn't have a steroids podcast.
And Arnold right now is pushing some vegan protein and making this fake vegan movie about how it's the best diet for bodybuilders, man. He has fallen off the train.
But he's always been like, he's never been the picture of ethics, Arnold. He always is in some weird shit. I mean, he's a politician.
Point, it's like he's Fonzie on Happy Days. He jumped the shark on the jet skis.
Yeah, but it's crazy. People will always jerk off Arnold because he, got a lot of us into it and he inspired us with his movies and stuff like that. But as an individual, I'm not a huge fan of him, honestly. He doesn't seem he doesn't seem like a really honest person to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Is there any bodybuilders from that era that you've listened to that you actually like? I really like Tom Platz and Rick Drayson. I think that they're really cool from what I've heard.
Yeah, man. Tom Platz is dope. Like, I would say out of all of the golden era bodybuilders, he is the most transparent. He's not trying to pull the blinds over anyone. I've never heard him say anything that made me think, oh, he's trying to make us not know why he really looks this way.
I saw a clip. He went on a show back in the 80s, 70s or 80s, and he talked about using steroids on the show, and he admitted to it.
Yeah, like on a talk show in front of like women and stuff, right?
Yeah, I remember. And like I remember he like took off his shirt and the women were like, wow. And then he took off his pants and everyone was like, oh my God. They saw his legs and they were disgusted by them. And then they asked him about steroids and he said, obviously he gave the whole spiel like, steroids don't make champions and all that shit, which is, it is obviously true. But then, he admitted to taking it. He didn't deny it. And I think that was pretty progressive for the time, although maybe they were still legal when he was saying that.
They were, but he was also saying something too during that about like how, he feels conflicted about it. And he doesn't feel like 100% confident in his decision to use them. He feels like he wished that there were another way, but he's just being forced to do this out of needing to compete and be on the same level as other people. But he was open about saying that he didn't really think the steroids were the greatest ethical thing or something like that.
What do you think about that?
It just made me think that he had a good mindset, because he wasn't trying to pretend that he was something that he was even comfortable publicly exposing, what goes into that, and saying that he had some insecurities and everything, and admitting that made me see, hey, this guy, he's honest with himself and the public.
Yeah, I think that is very honest of him, and I think that that's very transparent. I mean, I think sometimes people, when they're giving themselves an injection or something, might think, why am I doing this? But I think that really, and I've looked in my heart, because I quit bodybuilding before. I just stopped doing it. I always intended to go back, but I just felt like I couldn't fit it into my life at the time. And I think now, like after thinking about it a lot, the reason why people do bodybuilding is that, it's about a dream, that people have. And it's like as a kid, you dream to look this certain way, to be big and to have the respect and just to be that guy. And then I feel like as you get older, that fire just grows in you. And eventually some people get to a point where they'll do anything to realize that dream. And if it means ejecting themselves, then, that's really the tip of the iceberg. It's like you become cool with it because you have to accomplish your dream.
Okay, I think a lot of people, they go through that Tom Platz phase where they feel uncomfortable about what they're doing and may even be lying to themselves for a while about what they're doing, where they'll like go take the steroid, but then go to the gym and basically like be pretending they're natural and telling themselves in their heads like I'm natural or whatever. Bodybuilding can be a pretty weird thing mentally. And then after a while of using them for a long time, eventually they can more get to that point where they admit to themselves that they use roids and, hopefully at some point can be honest to other people about it too.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, I feel like nowadays online, it's like everybody wants to know about roids and cycles and everything like that because everyone who wants to be a bodybuilder just wants to know the truth about how to like accomplish their dream. They just really want to know, how do I look like Tom Platz? How do I look like these guys? And like just them talking about, yeah, I take steroids. I don't recommend other people do it, but it's just a personal decision I made. And leaving it at that, like it doesn't really give people they're like they want to know, like, okay, but what do you take,
Yeah, and how much? And don't lie to me. Tell me how much.
Yeah, and I just feel like by not telling people how much, like a lot of these professional athletes they're not helping them because it's like you can talk about diet and training like ad nauseum, but it's like, okay, but it just doesn't work unless you tell me how much and what.
Yeah. And that's another reason why people, they want to become a bodybuilder, so they start doing the training and the diet with the fake natties, and then they say okay, well this is no good, and then they get obsessed with learning about steroids. And the reason why is because they realize, oh, if I want to be, subconsciously or consciously, they realize, oh, the most important thing about being a bodybuilder is having the right hormones, the right steroids. The diet and the training are secondary to that.
So how do you think that somebody could go about like nowadays if they want to live a lifestyle similar to the golden era lifestyle? I would say that the most important thing would be to find a gym where someone feels like there's a community there.
Yeah,
Like
and not being in the inner city. You got to be at a beach, man. Like for the guys who haven't visited Gold's Gym Venice Beach yet, that thing is right next to the beach. You can walk to the beach from there, and you get the similar feeling when you're in Thailand in the city Phuket or the island Koh Samui. Mostly though in the city Phuket because there's a lot of Australians and Russians there who are into bodybuilding, and also Swedish guys. So there's quite a bodybuilding scene there.
yeah, I was just there on that street. They have this one street there, and it's just I forget the name of it, but it's where I get my tattoos, and it's just nonstop Muay Thai gyms, uh, CrossFit gyms, pharmacies, and tattoo shops, and
Yeah.
it has such like a that kind of vibe, and I just love places that have that kind of vibe where it's like I think the special thing about the golden era was like it wasn't somebody isolated. It was like they were part of a community that was into bodybuilding, and that was like their primary like reason for being friends. It's like a church, you know what I mean? It's like people going to church together and they all love Jesus and that's what they want to talk about and that's what they want to do and stuff like that. And some people will be like hardcore priests or whatever, and other people will just be like casual whatever, but I just feel like that feeling is kind of the golden era feeling that I would like to, give people in the podcast when they listen. Like there's other guys who, are not professional bodybuilders, but just love the lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. I
I,
like that. I like that too.
have you ever experienced that sort of feeling? I know muscle you kind of had that training in Muscle Factory where there was kind of like a crew. What do you think about training with like a crew as opposed to training with by yourself? Because I know you've also did a lot of training by yourself.
Yeah, I prefer not to train by myself. I prefer to have a training partner or training, partners, because I can train harder with them
Mhm.
than I can when I'm training by myself. But Muscle Factory did have, a bit of a feeling like that, but it did not compare to the authentic Gold's Gym Venice Beach, and it did not compare to going to Phuket and doing bodybuilding there. Like, actually having the beach in the proximity is huge for trying to live the Golden Era lifestyle,
Mhm.
because being in a place where the girls are in bikinis, the dudes are in their
Short shorts.
stringers,
Yeah.
yeah, and their short shorts and stuff, and the type of food, the type of lifestyle, that is around those beach areas, the air, the way it feels, it like the beach is an integral part of it. And so if you want to live the Golden Era lifestyle, you have got to find a beach with a gym.
Yeah, man. It doesn't even have to be like a crazy gym. I remember I was on this island, and that's why I think that Thailand it would be like the perfect place to try to recreate something like this because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like you can't do it in California anymore. It's changed, you know?
Yeah, California
It just
sucks.
it just doesn't have I feel like it doesn't have like America in general. It just the 70s had this I don't know what you call it. It's I guess like the word come to mind, although it's probably not right, but like just this like ignorance, you know what I mean? It's just like fuck it, like let's just enjoy life and train and just love to do what we do, you know? And I just feel like in Thailand, people are just so much more present to the moment. And I
Yes.
and I feel like they used to be like that in the 70s for some reason. Like when you watch Pumping Iron, you just get this vibe that they're not overthinking it, they're just living it. And I feel like in Thailand, everyone lives like that. So it's just easy to just fall into that.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things, the charming things about Thailand, actually. So when you go there, most people, when they go there, want to go again or want to stay longer because it's a charming place because of those reasons you just said.
And I feel like people used to be moving like all the way across the world to go to California to like, live this lifestyle or whatever, but it doesn't really happen anymore, right?
Yeah, well, California, it's it's such a mess with the way that the social justice warriors here. I mean, those people are so miserable. They just destroy the whole state.
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot since the 70s. But you said you were at Gold's Gym Venice and you still really liked it. You were training inside the gym for a while, right?
Yeah, but then when I would go out, when I go out of the gym, the beach is there, so we'd be at the beach, and then we'd be driving home, and we'd have the ocean out the side of our view, with the ocean air coming in. So it definitely has that sandy beach atmosphere still.
That's awesome. So yeah, I was gonna say I was on Ko Chang
Hmm.
and there was this gym so we were staying at like in like this bungalow that was right on the beach. It was like $17 a night and the gym was right across the street and there was obviously there's always a pharmacy right next to the gym. And I think that's another aspect that makes it kind of like golden era-ish that you can just walk into the pharmacy and get whatever you want,
Yeah, yeah.
like
That has an
you
aspect.
you can have like all the gear that you want, you know what I mean? Like, but it's another type of thing to just walk into the pharmacy and just have it all in front of you,
Yeah, get it
and just
without having to cover your face with a C virus mask to protect your
yeah.
identity.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of the gear was so like it's just like those 500 pill bottles of like anabols, the five
Hmm.
milligrams. It just like I felt like I was Rick Drayson, you know what I mean, with like the 5 milligram anabols. It wasn't like some pill pressed like UGL garbage. It
That's
was
a
like
good point. Yeah, they've still got a bunch of those same brands over there that they were using during the golden era. So you can actually even use the same steroids they were using.
yeah, and it just like everything just feels like, everything just feels so much more cool, like and open, and you can just be yourself. Whereas I feel like in America, it's like as a bodybuilder, it's just different. And also how the people treat you. Like when I listen to the Rick Drayson stories of like when they would walk around, people would acknowledge them as bodybuilders and like girls thought it was cool. Like people would talk to them in the street and like it was like they were like popular because they were bodybuilders and people like recognized that it was unique and it was cool. And in the
Yeah,
US, it's
and girls in Thailand, you know, if you're a bodybuilder, they think you have a giant dick. You know, opposite from America. In America, they're like, "Oh, he takes steroids. He must have a small dick." In Thailand, they're like, or Asia in general, you know, they're like, "He takes steroids. He must have a monster penis."
Yeah, and I just feel like it's like we would walk around and people would be like, oh, like wanting to take pictures with us or like, looking at us, not in like a rude way though, but just like, and I
Yeah,
don't know if it's like that anymore because there's probably so many more like, just generally foreigners and like bodybuilders there. But I feel like that's also kind of part of like the golden era vibe. It's like you're really nothing special. Like you're just a bodybuilder, but people like you because you have big muscles and that's all. Not because
yeah,
you're like famous or because you are rich or you're on Instagram or anything, but literally just because you worked out and just got big muscles and that's cool.
yeah, yeah. It's very simple.
I just love that vibe, dude. I would love to live on the beach in Koh Chang and just go to that like ratty gym and just eat like chicken and pineapple and white rice and that would be it.
Yeah, I mean, I bet a lot of guys listening to this right now are thinking, "I want that life too."
Yeah, I know. It's my ultimate goal with this sort of thing, like why I like the Platinum Era is I want to create an atmosphere where people could do that. Even for like a short while, you know what I mean? Where like, if it grows, like you probably have enough fans to even be able to do something like this where every like, a good bit of people meet up and in a place like that and do like training and live that lifestyle for like 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I
that'd
just
be
feel
dope.
like that would be so fun. And like the content that would come out of that would be like really interesting. And everybody just goes wild and just does whatever they want. And it's all legal and cool. Like that would be the ultimate goal for some kind of event or something like that. That would be awesome. But all right, let's talk about the golden era a little bit more. So we went over the diet and the drugs, but what about the training? Like, what do you think about the training they were doing? Just super high volume for like 2 hours, and then coming back at night and doing 2 hours. I feel like I couldn't train like I don't know. They must have. I feel like there's some kind of exaggeration because you can't go heavy and hard for that long.
Yeah, and it doesn't match up because there's that from the 70s, but then from the 50s and the 60s, they were all doing stuff like, you know, Bill Starr 5x5, or, you know, like 3 sets of 5 reps on only compound exercises, you know? And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden in the 70s, it's like, boom, no. Now it's this high ultra volume shit going on. And that makes me think there's more exaggeration or mixed stuff going on.
Yeah, you think that they were lying about it a little bit just to try to ham it up to seem like they were such like super athletes for the magazines and stuff like that.
Yeah, and also because like they're so insecure about taking steroids that you know they had to come up with some kind of an excuse that would say, you know, like this, you know, this is how I made myself look like this. I work out for 4 hours a day, twice a day,
Yeah.
and then like, oh, okay, that's how you did it, not the steroids,
Every time, have you ever tried to do two a days?
dude. If you even lift one a day, every day, you will be burned out in 4 days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I tried to do two a days before, and it's just like, dude, I felt like I was mentally brain dead.
Yeah,
Like, I
there,
would have
there
like really bad anxiety before I went to the gym, like after like, oh, maybe a week.
and it's like, welcome to no progressville, baby. Welcome to overtraining, feeling like crap, losing your strength.
Yeah, imagine working out for 4 hours a day and not eating not eating carbs and also being natural and just taking Joe Weider supplements.
Such a
And
big fish story.
the
Sounds like Jonah and the whale.
it's like it's kind of like today, people try to, I think they were really trying to fuck around with that stuff. Mike Menser was a real I respect that guy
Well,
because
his training was more like, you know, the low volume, right? Just the compound exercises for a couple sets.
yeah, and I think that makes way more sense, especially as a natural.
Yeah. Well, since I've been on steroids, actually, using those routines that would really work for me when I was natural, like Mark Ripto's starting strength, or Bill Starr or Mad Cow 5x5 powerlifting workouts. Now that I'm on steroids, oh my gosh, dude, those workouts are so effective. Even at having been taking steroids for a long time, go back to these workouts, 3 sets of 5 reps with the same weight for all sets across. Do it 3 times a week for a compound exercise. I start getting bigger, growing more muscle tissue, more strength. Physique gets building blocks.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. I think it really does come down to progressive overload if you want to get bigger. But if you don't want to get bigger, though, you can train like they did if you want to just do it for fun and just take a bunch of steroids and you'll be having a good time. Just get a
Yeah,
pump.
or if you want to get like a killer body that the average public is going to think looks amazing. I mean, really all you need to do is just be lifting light weights in the gym while you take steroids and eat, enough food so that you're not very heavy.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's kind of what they were doing to an extent. I don't know. We'll never know how they really train, but I think they probably trained like anybody else. They probably just did like 12 to 8 to 12 sets per body part and just left. And then when they
Uh,
got interviewed, they were just like, oh, yeah. But I think you could train. I know that Rick Drayson said they train twice a day, and I believe him. But, what did they actually they would come in and do chest like 10 sets, and then later they would come in and do triceps like, 5 sets and shoulders like 3 sets. So they just split up a normal workout. Uh,
yeah, that makes sense. I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, they'd probably be stronger then for the accessory exercises.
Yeah. Remember when we tried the Steve Reeves workout at that gym?
Yeah,
That was pretty brutal, the full body, and it took like 2 hours.
yeah, that was.
I feel like if I trained like that 3 times a week, I would get pretty big.
Yeah, 3 times a week and then load up on the food. And yeah, you could definitely recover.
Yeah. So the training, I don't know. I guess we'll never know really, but I think it might make sense to do the compound lifts. If you just live on the beach and you don't do anything, then you could just do the compound lifts and then come back and do the accessories later. Another thing that I think was a big part of the era that people don't really talk about is gay for pay, right?
Yeah. A
Um,
lot of the bodybuilders, just like you were saying, yeah, most of them did not have jobs in the golden era. And a lot of them were homeless, except for a box of steroids, and they could afford some food.
yeah, and I think not having a job is also a really big part of that like mystique. Like, how do these guys not have jobs?
Yeah.
And
Well, they were doing butt sex for pay. That's why.
yeah, and like I think Rick Drayson talks about how he did like wrestling and stuff like that, and acting, and a lot of them did acting too, like on the side. There's a lot of actually cool like vintage whatever shows where like bodybuilders just randomly show up as like the jock or like the bully or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of cool too. But I think it's important to remember that it was Hollywood, so there definitely was a lot of that type of stuff going on as well. So when you idolize these guys, you got to put it in perspective a little bit. That
Hmm.
lifestyle it's not all it was cracked up to be. But I think that the people only really like to focus on the girls and the muscles and like not having a job and chilling on the beach, but they don't really see the other stuff. But
Yeah.
I think nowadays with the advent of technology, though, it's possible to live that kind of lifestyle and work remotely, which they didn't really have the ability to do.
Yeah. And I mean, you know what? There's OnlyFans for these, neo gay for pay bodybuilders. And I actually met some of them when I was in Thailand. I met some of these dudes who were, they told me they were straight, and then they'd tell me, how do you get your money, bro? Where are you getting your, I see you're on Genotropin, I see you're on Primobolan, and this other stuff, and oh, they let me know that they work for gay webcams. They earn their money jacking off for gay people on webcams. So they're unfortunately bodybuilding is still just absolutely saturated with this degeneracy, and
it the bodybuilding, we need to have the bodybuilders need to reject all this gross smut and just be more upstanding citizens, you know.
You know what I saw? I think that the hardcore guys though, like Dorian Yates, his influence, I think that they really helped a lot of guys step away from that. Because I think a lot of guys get into bodybuilding because they lack direction, and then they get seduced by this sort of whatever, like gay lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Dorian Yates and his influence of just being hardcore, even though we were kind of talking against it a little bit and how it can be destructive, but I think part of being hardcore is like not doing that. Like I think him and his guys really pride themselves on like not doing that. And a lot of guys in the 90s were also all about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's something to be said about not doing that.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely for myself, you know, just being like a bodybuilding public figure for years, you know, I'd get, when I was in Thailand, you know, I'd get lady boys chasing me down the streets, you know, on Instagrams, you know, I get DMs, you know, from homosexuals saying to me, you know, uninvited DMs from homosexuals saying things to me like, you know, like, oh, your lats are so perfect, you know, if only they could be more perfect if I planted kisses upon them, you know, or something like that, you know. So I get all this crap, you know, and it's definitely, you know, rejecting all of it is it's disturbing to me, receiving all that crap. But you know, the gays seem to be absolutely um, infatuated with bodybuilders. Just FYI, for you prospective bodybuilders out there, you think you're going to start taking steroids and getting a lot of attention from women, you're going to get a lot of attention from gay men.
Yeah, it was in Thailand. It was definitely a big thing too. I remember I was in the gym and like these guys were like making kissy faces at me and stuff like that, and I was like, "What are these guys like doing?" I don't like get it. Do they want to work in? And then
Jeez.
I got it pretty quickly, you know.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, okay. I was just shocked, you know. I didn't really know what was going on. And there was a guy in my Muay Thai gym who was also being weird. But you
Mm.
know, it happens anywhere, I guess, and I'm sure it happens to guys who are bodybuilders too. But it's definitely a factor.
Yeah, and
But
just be aware too that people don't know this for some reason, but bodybuilders, it's like a gay man's dream. So when he sees you, he just like goes ballistic.
I would say it's important for the young guys to know, you know. A lot of young guys getting into bodybuilding and they have these just dreams, like they want to be a pro or they want to be a good bodybuilder, make a living off of it or something like that. Before they know it, they have a good physique and, you know, all the food and the steroids in the gym and all this stuff is not cheap. And then, you know, before they know it, they go down this rabbit hole. And I feel like it's getting more accepted these days to like be on OnlyFans and do that type of stuff. And like it just doesn't give it doesn't give the whole thing a good image. You know what I mean? It hurts all of us when
Yeah,
somebody gets involved.
the people that are getting involved with stuff like that, they're destroying their lives. They're doing irreparable, long-lasting damages to their brains by, you know, becoming an amateur pornographer and pimp of themselves like that. You know,
Yeah.
they're not just the pornographer; they're also the pimp, the marketer. You know, they set the prices, they advertise themselves, they create and produce the porn. It's, you know, you're really choosing a dark path getting into that.
Yeah, so I would say that, you know, although we do think that the lifestyle is awesome that we're talking about, you know, if you have to compromise your own ethics, then there's no amount of growth hormone that can make that right, you know?
Yeah,
And I would say from personal experience to anybody listening, it makes way more sense to take a step back and get your financial situation comfortable because bodybuilding is expensive so that you can live the lifestyle that you want than to compromise your morals
yeah,
because you know bodybuilding will always be there. You can get pretty jacked up in a year if you really, you know, train hard and you cycle hard and you'll be fine, you know. There's no reason to, because once you go down that path, it's hard to get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to see you guys doing good, making good decisions that are going to make you happy bodybuilders.
Yeah, and in the long run too, because this shit is for life. Like if you want to be jacked, you got to always be working out. You got to always be taking steroids. So you need to have a way to make it happen that's sustainable, uh, and that's not. So a lot of the guys from the golden era, like you said, ended up being homeless, and you see videos now, and they're like crazy and stuff like that. So it's important to note too that that side of bodybuilding is always there, and just because it might seem like it has like a golden aura around it doesn't mean it's perfect. But I don't want to end on a bad note.
I
uh
want to say one thing though. So me and Elon we've been through this. So we didn't come into bodybuilding knowing all this stuff like already. This stuff that we've been discussing during this podcast episode has been insider knowledge that we've gained through experience. Being doing this for over a decade. So we didn't come into it thinking those things, but we are now having been in it. We can tell you guys that don't know yet that there's all these tricks and traps for you to fall in. And so when you're doing bodybuilding and making your decisions about how you're going to do it, just make sure to use some discernment.
Yeah. I think that's a really good message, and kind of like, what I want to do with the platinum era whole thing, right? And I'm glad to have you be a part of it, Dan. I appreciate you, coming on the show and talking about it and sharing your experience too. It's like, I just want to make a new era, because I feel like it's been a while, and bodybuilding is it's so fragmented now. It's like all over the place, and
Mm-hmm.
I just want to have something that people can attach themselves to say, we are bodybuilders. We're not ashamed of it, but we're not crazy. We're not drug addicts. We're not, porn stars. We're just normal guys,
Yeah. Yeah.
And we like taking steroids. We love training, and we like to eat healthy and look good, and we like to get attention and to be popular for what we do, and there's nothing wrong with that, and we should all get together and just enjoy that together. I mean, that's really what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Agree 100%.
All right, man, thanks for coming on. I gotta go because my freaking, due to the C virus, my store is closing in 50 minutes, and I'm like all out of protein, so I gotta stock up. All
Great.
right, man, hopefully we could do another one next week, and we can talk about the 80s, and maybe if you want to, we could do like a post to get some questions or something like that about the 70s or 80s or whatever, so we can have something else so we don't drone on and bore people.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks for giving me a call, Elon.
All right, man, thank you. Peace.